What did Jungkook say that made even the toughest soldiers cry? On a quiet morning unlike any other, the air around the South Korean military base was unusually still, as though the world was holding its breath. After 18 months of anticipation, speculation, and silent waiting, the youngest member of BTS, Jungkook, was finally completing his military service. But no one, not even the most devoted fans or his closest brothers in BTS, could have predicted what would unfold in those final minutes before he walked through the gates. Because as he turned around one last time, Jungkook said something that silenced the crowd, made grown men weep, and sent a tidal wave of emotion across the globe. But before we reveal those unforgettable words, we need to understand the weight behind them. Jungkook didn't enter the military like just any idol. No, he went in as a legend. The Golden Magne. The one who stood center stage in sold-out arenas across the world. The one whose voice echoed through stadiums, whose tears fell on award stages, and whose smile could stop traffic. For a man like Jungkook to put his global stardom on hold, to wear the same uniform as every other young Korean man, and to disappear into the discipline and duty of the military, it was more than a transition. It was a sacrifice. A quiet promise that he would serve his country just as he had served his fans, with everything he had. But of course, he did it his way. Not loudly. Not with a parade of cameras or grand declarations. He entered the military with dignity, humility, and a soft wave goodbye that broke millions of hearts. Army knew it would be a long wait. Some tried to prepare emotionally, others clung to his last message. A video, softly lit, with just him speaking to the camera. "I'll be back," he had said. "Stronger. Better. Just wait for me." And we did. The months crawled by. His absence was felt like a silent echo in every BTS project, every fan video, every trending hashtag. While his fellow members slowly followed him into service, Jungkook remained a symbol of hope, the first to go, the first to come back. And with every passing day, the anticipation grew. Then, finally, the date was confirmed. June 11th. The day Jungkook would officially be discharged. Fans gathered. Quietly, respectfully, but in large numbers. Not outside the base, no. Jungkook would never want a public spectacle there. But online. In hearts. On Twitter. On TikTok. On Instagram. Every post was laced with the same electricity. "He's coming back. AT the base." The mood was different. Among his fellow soldiers, Jungkook had built a reputation not just as a celebrity, but as a comrade. One who trained as hard as anyone. One who stayed up late to help others. One who never used his fame as an excuse. He earned his stripes with sweat and silence. He wasn't Jungkook of BTS in there. He was Private John. And today, he was being honored not just for completing service, but for the way he completed it, with grace, grit, and humility. At 8 a.m., the moment arrived, a quiet ceremony. Few cameras, fewer words. He received his discharge papers, saluted his officers, and hugged the men who had stood beside him for 18 months. His hair was slightly longer, darker. His face leaner, more defined. There was a stillness to him. The calm of a man who had faced solitude and come out wiser. Then, just as he turned to leave, someone asked him a question. A junior soldier, voice trembling, called out, "Young, before you go, can you tell us one thing you learned in here?" The silence that followed was heavy. Jungkook paused, looked down, then up, and then he spoke. It wasn't a long speech. It wasn't rehearsed, but it was real. So real. It pierced through the air like a blade of truth. "I came in here thinking I had to put away who I was, but I found myself here. In the silence. In the cold. In the early mornings. I found a part of me that wasn't an idol or a performer. Just a man. And what I've learned is even when the stage lights are off and no one is watching, you have to live with heart. Because someday, the world will see it again. And when they do, I want to be proud of who I became in the dark." Gasps. Then silence. Then tears, not dramatic, not loud, but real, the kind of moment that makes your chest ache because it reminds you that even the brightest stars fight their battles in the dark. And then he walked to no cameras, no PR team, just Jungkook, a man who had entered as a global superstar and exited as something even greater, a man who had faced quiet, duty, isolation, and grown. But what made that moment unforgettable wasn't just what he said. It was what it meant for him, for BTS, for ARMY. Because that final sentence wasn't just a message to soldiers, it was to all of us. He was coming back. Not just as Jungkook, the idol, but as Jungkook, the man who had changed in the shadows and was now ready to step into the light again. And that was only the beginning. Because what happened after he left the base? That's where the real story starts. His first move stunned the world. A secret visit, a silent gesture, a message hidden in plain sight. But for now, let that image linger. Jungkook, standing at the gate, eyes soft, voice steady, walking away not from duty, but toward destiny. Why would Jungkook leave behind a handwritten letter, and why did he hide it? As the news of Jungkook's military discharge spread like wildfire across the globe, the emotions didn't settle, they intensified. Fans cried, laughed, screamed, and gasped all at once. Hashtags exploded on social media. Every corner of the internet lit up with "Welcome back, Jungkook," and "He's finally home." But just when ARMY thought they had experienced the peak of emotion, just when the world was breathing again after his final words at the military base, something unexpected surfaced, a single letter, unannounced, undocumented, unpublicized, hidden in plain sight. IT was found not by a journalist or a manager, but by a fellow soldier, a quiet, 20-year-old conscript who had served alongside Jungkook for 6 months. This young man, who asked to remain unnamed, never sought fame or attention. But what he revealed would rattle the hearts of millions. In a heartfelt message on a private fan community, he wrote, "I was clearing out our shared locker room after morning duty. On the top shelf, wrapped in a plain envelope, I found a letter addressed to those who stood with me in silence. At first, I thought it was for the commanding officers. But then I opened it and realized Jungkook had written something he didn't want the world to see, something just for us." The letter was quickly verified. Jungkook had written it by hand, using simple stationery provided by the base. His handwriting, neat, compact, unmistakable, carried not just words, but weight. Every syllable, a testament to everything he couldn't say on camera. The contents of the letter, though never meant to be public, have since been translated and shared, and what they revealed left fans speechless. "I came here thinking I had to be quiet, that I had to hide the pieces of me that laughed too loud or sang in the dark. But you didn't treat me like a celebrity. You treated me like a brother. That meant more to me than you'll ever understand." In this place, where no one clapped and no one cheered, I found something more powerful than applause. I found respect. To my squad mates, thank you for never asking me to be Jungkook. Thank you for letting me just be John. And if any of you are reading this, just know, if you ever feel like no one's watching, I am. If you ever feel like giving up, don't. The world needs you, maybe more than you know. He closed the letter with a single line that broke the internet. "The world called me golden, but here, I just wanted to be human. And thanks to you, I was." The fan base didn't just react, they mourned. As though the letter itself had opened a door to a side of Jungkook they had always felt but never seen. Suddenly, his silence during service wasn't distant, it was intimate. His absence wasn't emptiness, it was evolution. The phrase, "the world called me golden," began trending worldwide within minutes. Artists began illustrating the letter. Fans began writing response letters. Military veterans, even those unfamiliar with K-pop, began posting about how deeply the words resonated with their own experiences, and quietly, amidst the noise, a deeper question began to form. Why didn't Jungkook release this publicly? Why hide it? Why let it be discovered by accident? The answer wasn't clear at first. But slowly, those who had followed Jungkook for years began to understand, because this wasn't for publicity, that IT was for healing, that IT was for gratitude. It was his final act of service, not as an idol, but as a soldier. And perhaps, as a human being seeking something no amount of fame could give him, peace. But the story doesn't end there. The young soldier who found the letter, moved by its honesty, requested permission to make a copy and leave the original where he found it. And so it remains, safely tucked away, on a shelf inside a military base in South Korea. Untouched, unclaimed, a message frozen in time. And yet, the emotional domino effect it set off has only just begun. Because the next day, something else happened. A member of BTS, one who hadn't posted for weeks, suddenly went live on Weverse. It was Jimin, with red eyes. Sitting in a dark room, he said only one sentence before logging off. I read the letter. He didn't say which one. But he didn't have to, and the floodgates opened again. Fans now had a puzzle to piece together. What other messages had Jungkook left? Were there more? Was the letter at the base the only one? Clues began to emerge. A sudden change in his Spotify playlist before discharge. A cryptic quote left on his military locker's door. Even a sketch found among his belongings, later identified as the silhouette of a soldier kneeling under moonlight with the words, "Still with you," scribbled beneath it. The fandom was no longer just watching a comeback. They were experiencing a spiritual return. But more than just scavenging for secrets, ARMY began reflecting, writing, creating, healing. Because what Jungkook had done wasn't just say goodbye to his squad. He'd reminded every fan around the world that silence doesn't mean absence, that humility is louder than any headline, and that sometimes the most powerful words are the ones written when no one's looking. And still, the real question lingers. If he left this message for his fellow soldiers, what did he leave for us? What does he want ARMY to know, now that he's back? You won't believe what he said in the first message he recorded after discharge. What if Jungkook never planned for the world to hear his first words after discharge? Just hours after Jungkook walked out of the military base, his footsteps steady, his face calm, but his final words echoing around the globe, something unexpected happened. The fandom was still reeling from the emotional impact of his hidden letter, and yet, the universe wasn't done revealing his heart. A private audio message, recorded in the quiet of his homecoming, surfaced online. It wasn't polished. It wasn't planned. It wasn't even meant to be heard by the public. But it happened, and once it did, nothing was ever the same again. But how did it happen? And why did it leave millions sobbing? The audio was only 3 minutes and 47 seconds long. It wasn't posted on Weverse, not on Instagram, not through HYBE's PR team. It was leaked, softly, through an anonymous account, one that disappeared within minutes. But before it vanished, ARMY captured it, translated it, and shared it like wildfire across platforms. Because once you heard Jungkook's voice in that raw, fragile state, you couldn't unhear it, and the first line is, "Anyone else awake right now? Because I can't sleep." His voice was lower than usual, quiet, almost like a whisper. There was no background music, no editing. You could hear him sitting down, possibly on the edge of his bed, and the faint rustle of what sounded like military papers still in his hands. I've been staring at the ceiling for hours. My room feels smaller, quieter, too quiet. His voice cracked. Once. Then again. He paused. I thought I would be relieved, that walking out of the base would feel like flying. But instead I feel heavy. Like I left part of myself behind. And maybe I did. You could hear him exhale. A shaky breath. The kind you take when you're trying not to cry. When I looked at my phone again for the first time, there were thousands of messages. From my members. From ARMY. From people I don't even know. And yet, I felt like a stranger in my own world. It was the kind of honesty no one expected. Jungkook, the icon of confidence, the king of fan service, The idol who smiled even when his heart was breaking wasn't smiling here. He wasn't performing. He was confessing. And then he said something no one was ready for. During service, I stopped singing. Not because I wasn't allowed, but because I didn't know who I was without the applause. There it was, the truth. But then one night in winter, I was on night guard. It was freezing. Everyone was asleep, and I started humming, quietly, just to myself. No beat, no lyrics, just a hum. And it felt like breathing again. That's when I realized music isn't something I do because people are watching. It's something I am. And even in silence, the song stays. It was a spiritual moment. ARMY listening in their bedrooms, on the train, in cafes, stopped breathing for a second. Because this wasn't just a message. It was a rediscovery. He was finding himself again. And then came the most emotional part of the audio. His voice dropped. It trembled. He took another pause. To anyone who waited for me, I'm sorry I couldn't speak sooner. I didn't want to say anything until I had something real to say. And now I do. You could hear him shifting slightly, maybe wiping his eyes. I missed you. Not the stage. Not the fame. You. The way ARMY listens. The way you send messages like prayers. The way you always know when I'm hurting, even when I say I'm fine. He exhaled again, longer this time. I'm not fine yet, but I'm coming back. As me. Not the golden boy. Not the perfect idol. Just Jungkook. And I hope that's enough. The last few seconds of the audio were just silence. And then, softly, the faint strum of an acoustic guitar. Not a full song. Just a single chord, a promise. And then click. The audio ended, and the hours that followed, social media descended into emotional chaos. Just Jungkook began trending globally. Fans flooded the internet with responses. Emotional artwork. Letters. Poetic edits. Voice messages. Even veterans and therapists began commenting, praising Jungkook for his vulnerability and the way it could help normalize post-service emotional reflection among men, especially in South Korea, where such discussions are often stigmatized. But behind the collective emotion, another question began rising. Who released this message? Because it wasn't official. And it wasn't posted by him. A few hours later, fans discovered the account was created using a burner email known to be linked to one of Jungkook's closest friends, an older cousin who had occasionally been mentioned in early interviews but had since stayed out of the spotlight. And in a now-deleted message on that account, a simple line appeared. He recorded this before he went to sleep. I couldn't keep it to myself. It was gone 10 minutes later, but that moment, it changed everything. Because now ARMY knew Jungkook wasn't just physically returning. He was emotionally reopening. Slowly, carefully, genuinely. And if that 3-minute message carried this much emotional weight, what else had he been holding back? One journalist on Korean national TV summed it up best. Jungkook didn't just return from military service. He returned from silence. And sometimes, silence speaks louder than the loudest stage. But the surprises weren't over, because the next morning, before anyone had time to recover from the emotional avalanche, Jungkook did post something publicly. A photo, but not of himself, a picture of something unexpected. And hidden in that picture was a clue that sent fans into detective mode. Because the location, the lighting, the object in the corner, they all pointed to one thing. Jungkook wasn't just back. He was recording again, but not at HYB, a studio that hasn't been seen since BTS's earliest days. Why did Jungkook return to the place where everything began? And what exactly is he preparing to release?